really, isn't it?
The only problem is that
Yeah.
in Finland we, with the sauna culture and whatever, I don't think we would have such a big problem with somebody making.
Very true, yeah. Yeah, thanks for that. That's a good point. That's very nice. Well, the thing is that we have now a truth about what's happening in the world with climate change that is very scary. At least it seems very scary. I don't really know if it is, but it seems very scary. And how can we really share this this love that we have of our world and of our environment with our children without frightening them? How can we protect them and how can we prepare them for what's needed as best we can? Well, it's been really so nice to listen to Susa and to Claire, because it just feels like we're really working with the same thing. We're really working with the same thing, and somehow of themselves the stories lead us to working with nature and working with the children, with community and with our lives and with what our grandparents have done. And because after all, the stories that we receive are the stories that our grandparents have wanted to pass on to us, to help us to live in a way where we're living together with the world around us and not just shutting it out. If you can see in front of you an apple, but that apple has got a great big red rosy side on that side, and on this side it's green. And that red rosy side of the apple is the stories of courage, because I think we need to help our children to be brave in the world that they live in, to not be frightened, because in the media there's so much, isn't there, to frighten us. They go, oh, it's all going wrong. But no, we need to teach our children to be brave, and that's in the traditional stories, and in many other stories as well, the stories of how to be brave. A few years ago there was some research done looking at children from Afghanistan and looking at European children, and it seemed to show that the Afghan children were no more traumatised than European children. How can that be? They've been living in a war zone for, 30 years or something. I mean, they weren't alive then. And yet, somehow, their culture has maybe helped them to be brave, to face their lives as they are. So on one side there's that rosy side of helping our children to trust themselves and to be brave. And the traditional stories, there's so many of them about the little tiny, I'll tell one story about there's this big basket ogress who lives out on the mountain. She loves dirty children. And the bravest person of all is the smallest girl amongst all of the children, all her sisters and brothers. And she's very tiny, and she's even got a great big hump on her back. But she's still so brave that she manages to overcome the ogress. And this you find all over the world. It's the weak person, the child, who manages. And on the other side of the apple, there's the green, and that is our connection with the world around us. And I feel that the most important thing that we can help children with is to connect them, to make them feel this connection and this love for our world. And if we don't go out there and if we don't tell them those stories, then it's harder for them if they're sitting in a room with a computer to understand that it's something worth everything that we can give. So this work with environmental stories, I feel, really is about that. It's about reconnecting, particularly with young children. I really don't feel that there's any reason or any point to try and teach them about climate change and things like that. About the seasons, they need to know about the animals and the plants and the people. And as they get older, we can start to move into those other areas, but then again we still need to teach in a way that gives them courage, that makes them think, wow, this is an incredible moment in our history. And it's very exciting actually when you start to talk to young people in that way. Wow, yeah, and what are you going to see in your lifetime? It's really exciting. So one of the ways that I've been working is through walking and telling stories. And I was remembering the other day actually that the very first storytelling project I did when I was only 18 was that I went with a storyteller called Ben. We went out with our little brothers and sisters and we walked over the hills and we told stories to passers-by. And there's something about this walking and telling stories that can really be very, very rich. I live now on the east side of Oslo and we have a project. We live on the pilgrims route which goes from Oslo to Trondheim. And the whole thing takes 5 weeks. And we take 11, 12-year-olds out. And they come with an old man. He's actually 90 years old. But, he's still really fit. And he's still very beautiful. He's just incredible. And he's been living there all his life. And when he was a kid, he used to run around there without any shoes. And he knows, pretty much every rock. And he walks along with my colleague who grew up there in the 70s at the point at which this was like the place where nobody wanted to go. Everyone thought it was a terrible area. And they walk along and they meet me and I'm dressed up as someone from the Middle Ages. And I tell them about the pilgrim's route and exciting stories about what's happened to me on my way. And we walk up together and we see different plants on the way and then some bandits come down and attack us and we have to get free of the bandits. And this was in a place where actually there was a problem with bandits. And I give them a piece of gold if they can see this, that or the other. And we get up to the top. And then we're going to give them the pilgrim challenges. And the first challenge is to take their shoes off. And the children are like, what? It's almost like you're asking them to be naked, not Finnish people, but people in the way. Find that really quite scary, just to take your shoes off, But we say, yes, you have to do it, just for a couple of steps, and then you can put them back on again. And of course, once they've taken their shoes off, they don't want to put them back on again. And it's really this experience of walking on the warm stone or the warm moss and the cold water, and it's very invigorating. And then we tell them the story. Hello.
I mean, he's explaining that the food has arrived.
Oh, good.
Sorry.
And so it's a kind of, and they learn about St. Olav, and they learn about the herbs on the way, the different stories of different herbs. And also the little girl who's actually walked all the way up to Trondheim, a true story. And so it's these kind of story walks, they can be very rich. And what's nice is that in between the different, where they're hearing stories, they can start to tell their own stories and they start to sing, and it's a very creative way of hearing stories. So it's about the different generations, it's about listening to this old man, and most of the children we take actually are from immigrant families, so their families come from a different place, and they can meet somebody from Oslo who's grown up there all his life. And it's about identity, and it's about plants, and it's about their own experience and their own feet. I was walking this summer and I met a felter, and she took out some wool and she wrapped it around my feet, and I walked for a couple of hours and made these slippers. And that's something else that that one could do with children. So there's this great apple that I told you about. If you think about the green part as being local and the red part as being hero, we've called our project Local Hero. So in every place, there are heroines and there are heroes. There are stories of people who've been brave. And maybe very few people know that. So maybe you're the only person who knows the story of how brave your grandmother was on that day. But they're there. And that's what we're working with. We're starting with the local heroes and moving out from there to a sense of community. So in the summer we were working in a town called Nordic, where a man called Tord Heyerdahl, who made the Kon-Tiki, was born. When he was a little boy, he wasn't allowed to play with other children. His mother had very strict ideas, and so he played with animals and he played out in nature, and he was quite scared of other children. And when he was 5 years old, he was in an ice dam. His father owned this place where they would take out ice because before they had refrigerators, you needed ice to keep things cold. And he fell in the water, and it was the middle of winter. And from above the water, the ice was white and the water was dark. And from below the water, it was the opposite. And he couldn't understand why he couldn't get up in the dark bit. But of course, from underneath, it was a different world. And luckily, somebody saw his boot and pulled him out. So he almost drowned a couple of times, and he was terrified of water. He couldn't swim until he was a well-grown-up man. And yet, he sailed across the Pacific Ocean on a raft, which everybody told him was mad. So this is a story which kids can identify with. He wasn't a little hero from when he was little. No, he was scared, he was frightened. But yet somehow he won over that, really because of his love of nature and of the sea. So we tell his story and we walk around his town and we use the sea and the ships to bring up these things. And we also have found a local guy who also made a raft, and he tells about his own experience. So it's wonderful if you can find a local hero who is actually from your area to tell about their own story. Well, I better not carry on too much now, blah, blah, blah. There's lots more to say, but what we'll be doing in my workshop is we'll be working on storytelling skills. I've been teaching at university level in Norway for 13 years, and we'll be learning a couple of traditional stories which are connecting you to the world, because I just must say this, that really almost in all traditions all around the world, we are always, the hero, the heroine is being helped, aren't they, by the little creatures, by the trees, the plants, the old people, the humble, poor people. So we'll be learning a couple of those. So you have a couple of those stories to take away with you for your class, and you'll also have a story from real life to take away with you. We'll be learning some games and activities. We'll be doing a rap map, which is how to make a little rap about walking out in the countryside. We'll be discussing how to develop a project that might work in your school, that might be right for the place and the school that you're teaching in. So, I think that's it, unless anybody would like to ask a question.
You said that the first thing you asked them to do was take off their shoes. What were the other things that you asked them to do?
We ask them, they take a stone, and that's also a tradition which you find, I just heard in the summer, that they do it also in Africa, and it's a pilgrim tradition that you take a stone with you to remind you of a secret wish or of a prayer. And so they do that, and they take it with them all the way. And at the end, we put them in a pile, a cairn. And then the most difficult challenge is that we say to them, this is totally if you want to. You don't have to do this. It's the most difficult challenge, but if you want to do it, you can try. You know, it's not certain you'll manage. Okay, yeah, what is it? What is it? Well, it's actually to walk in silence without saying a single word the whole of the rest of the way. And they want to do it, and they do it. And of course, in that way, they take in nature in a really different way.
And the other thing, you're obviously working in Norway, do you do this in English?
No.
You're doing it in Norwegian?
Yeah. I do put in bits of English actually, so it's also a bit of an English lesson, but yeah.